Welcome, low ego action heroes. This is Debbie Levitt from DeltaCX.com. We're a full service CX and UX consultancy. Check us out. Though I'm hearing my website is a bit outdated. What can I say? Dentist's teeth. I'll get to it eventually. And welcome to episode 8 of the Think Out Loud series. This will go in the Think Out Loud playlist. And this is where I am teaching some CX and UX work by doing the work. Our first 7 shows, we designed a sort of business time tracking system, which was interesting. So you can look back at that. But the whole point is to do real or realistic UX work, thinking out loud, so you can learn how I approach things, because I find that's missing from UX education. I find that a lot of people say, okay, we have research or client requests or something. How do we know what to make? What do we do with that? So I'm trying to think out loud and fill those gaps. So we took a 2-week break on the show because no one had sent me anything. So if you would like to send in something for the show, I'm going to need it because this week's show is probably only going to take the 1 episode. So please, let's put it up on the screen. Use the deltacx.com/links to learn more about the stream. Certainly, please subscribe and you can send something in for Think Out Loud. So this week's suggestion came from someone who wanted to learn more about responsive mobile design. And so I found a webpage. I happened to look at a webpage this morning when I woke up on my phone, and it wasn't mobile friendly. And so when I got the request some hours later, I said, oh, perfect. I will take a look at how I would redesign this webpage and make it more mobile friendly now, and of course responsive mobile. Now, that being said, remember that if we don't incorporate users in our work, it's not UX work. It's web design. If we just make what we like or we make what the client asks for, it could be good work, it could be not good work, but it's kind of not UX. So we are going to kind of do a little bit of web design today, because again, this is being a fake series. We don't have any real research and we don't have any real users, and nobody asked me to work on this page. So we're going to take a real website who did not ask me to do this, and we're going to redo it. And if you're joining live, I want to hear your questions and your comments as we go. Of course, as we do in many shows, I want to start by thanking the people who are financially donating to the Delta CX channel. It is totally optional, but always appreciated. Last year, I made almost $800, so thank you so much for those of you who keep me in delicious cheese and chocolate chips. I bought some cheese this weekend. But again, totally optional. If you do on YouTube, if you do a what's it called, super chat or super sticker, something goes into the tip jar. This is the tip jar. A lot of people ask me why is there a cup on the screen? All right, let me switch screens to what we're going to be working on, and let's talk about it. Okay, so the webpage I happened to stumble on this morning, and I think you're all looking at it. So here's the chat room, here's me, here's the tip jar, and here's the web page. Now, this is a real live web page for a local museum, a museum not far from where I live, and a museum I've been to, and a museum I would absolutely highly recommend if anybody is ever visiting me or visiting the area in which I live. Wow, what a lovely museum. However, I think we can all agree this website appears to be from another era. And when I opened it up on my phone, it just took the whole website and, of course, what's the word I'm looking for? Like zoomed out so that the text was, microscopic. And so there is no mobile friendly version. And again, that's common for many websites that are for nonprofits and municipalities and things like that. So I'm not pooping on them. This is pretty common, but I think, we can come up with another idea. Now, again, this idea would be created without the input from users, which is why this isn't going to be fantastic UX, but hopefully it'll be good enough to teach some concepts of responsive mobile design, even though we're not doing it with all the proper UX trimmings. Hello, Jürgen and Sheer. Good to see you both. All right, so I've got a screen ready to go. I've got a fresh Axure file, and I am working in Axure. If you've joined me before, then you know I only work in Axure. Axure is not sponsored. I pay them. They don't pay me. And I'm just a super fan, and it is my only tool. So I don't sketch first, I don't use Figma first, etc. So we're pretending that it's our job to redesign, let's just say for the purpose of time, this one web page and make a mobile version. Now, of course, I would normally do research, and we've got a page for that. And these were some of the things we wrote in the previous project, so I just kind of left them. But I know that I would want to meet people who've been to the museum, people who might be tourists in the area but didn't know about the museum, and to just learn what types of information they look for when they are coming to museums. So let's say some of our research goals might be how tourists and locals use museum websites, types of information they look for first, actions they tend to take. Hi, Sylvia. Great to see you. Hope you've been well. Send me a private message and tell me what's been going on. And I'm just going to leave, I mean, obviously it's not 3 segments, worker bees. That was from the last one. So, you know, we can just say that there's going to be different types of people. Maybe we end up with 2 segments here. Maybe there's, you know, let's say 20 people. Maybe we have people who knew they wanted this museum. Sorry, I'm so used to writing music. And maybe we have tourists who like these types of places but didn't know specifically about this museum. So that way we can get people with some familiarity with this or the region, and then some people who are coming in pretty cold. And I probably wouldn't also do all of these artifacts as well. It's a bit much. I would probably blow through this a little bit on the fast side. So I'd probably do recordings. I'd probably do maybe a couple of typologies if it would help the museum. I would definitely create a presentation, but I'm not sure. I would probably just work from my notes. I would probably go a little bit fast on this one. I don't need different discussion guides. Everybody would get the same. And it's probably not 2 months of work. This one's shorter. Let's pretend this is 1 month of work. And I'm charging you $30,000. I don't know why. All right. Great. We've pretended we did research. Now we're going to pretend the research was done. We're going to pretend we learned all about local museum goers, tourists, and sightseers so that we know a thing. And now I'm going to close this too because this wasn't, and we're not going to evaluate it yet. All right, so we've got a homepage. Now, because we only have another, 50 minutes together and I want to get to the mobile responsive part, I'm going to use a lot of placeholders because as you can see from the website we're going to fix, it looks like they created their photos a million billion years ago. And so it wouldn't make sense for me to try to necessarily use these photos. I clicked on a few of them earlier and they seemed like in some cases they were fairly low quality. They weren't all of similar sizes. So just know that I would be working, as I've done in the past, with a museum like this, probably on some fresh photos, making sure that tall photos have the same ratio, making sure wide photos have the same ratio, because there's so much wonderful detail on this piece, but it got cut off because someone made some sort of band or collage. So I'm not going to use the pictures that they have now. I'm going to imagine future pictures, and I'm just going to use Axure placeholders. Also, actually the home page is this one. So we're going to start here, and this is the page we'll work on. But even so, you can see this photo isn't that great. I can't click on it. And they've decided to just throw all the information on the home page. So this is a pretty simple informational site. If Larry were here, he would say it's just brochureware. But again, from the perspective of a small local museum, that might be all they're going to do for now. Okay, so let's take a look at how we would rebuild some of this content. So again, oops, that's me. Hi. Bye. So again, I'm going to use a lot of placeholders just to try to move quickly through this. So let's imagine that we are designing for something that's 1200 wide. And I also know that some people use grid systems for this kind of thing. You can certainly use a grid system. These things are built into Axure. So we could do, I think it's global guides. Is it, help me. Global guides will let us set that up. Create guides, here it is. So just to go fast today, I'll just use one of Axure's standard grid systems. But if you have your own from where you work, you can of course put in your exact measurements for whatever your system is. And there we go, which means I kind of didn't need this page level one. Can I get rid of it? Probably not without messing up everything. All right, so let's start with the idea that there is some sort of website header. And again, I'm not going to take the time right now to redesign the header. We'll just imagine that there is a header. We'll imagine we don't want it to take up too much room because we want to get to the content relatively quickly. So maybe we imagine that the header is 100 pixels high. Header placeholder. And we can also imagine, if we're thinking about more modern web design. Now, this has breadcrumbs because it's obviously a part of a larger museum or cultural website. I wonder if there's a better way to get people back to those things rather than the breadcrumb. Because if I just landed here because I'm into this museum, it doesn't feel like I've gone somewhere. Thanks, Sylvia. So let's just imagine that we do some fairly traditional web design here. Maybe we start with a large hero image with some sort of really wonderful picture of a scene inside the museum. I usually don't recommend animating heroes or carousels because I would rather give people one thing and really drive that home, but that's my style. And sometimes if you're a web designer, the client says, hey, I want to do a looping thing with 3 pictures. So imagine this is that. So, what can we say about this museum that would really jump out at people? Well, it doesn't seem to have a slogan. And I'm not seeing anything here that I think is going to jump out at people. And yes, it is in Italian, which I know is not helping a lot of people. So I would probably just put a placeholder here for now. So maybe we just drag out a placeholder. And I don't know why I'm not getting snap to grid, snap to guides. It's supposed to snap to guides. It's not. All right. Everybody just put up with me then. So let's imagine I like to say lorem ipsum catchy slogan or headline. So that's what I typically do when I don't have text. Some people just put lots and lots of lorem ipsum, but I like to put lorem ipsum and then the intention of what's going to be here. And I will put more lorem ipsum text where I need to, but then somebody looking at this goes, we're going to need a catchy headline over here. Now, there isn't exactly a call to action for this particular site because it looks like they're not selling tickets online. It looks like if you want to come to the museum, just come to the museum and you're going to pay when you get there. So this website also doesn't have traditional calls to action, but we'll create a fake one just so that when we do our mobile responsive design, we can play around with where that button is going to go. So let's imagine that I've got a primary button. And perhaps it's going to go over here. Oh, let's move this guy over here. I don't know why it's not snapping, but I'm just going to ignore that. Disregard some of my colors. I made them on a separate day. So let's call this CTA. We'll just call it CTA. We'll pretend there's some sort of action there. Now let's start bringing in some of the text from the website just so that we have some placeholder stuff. Let's see. Let's grab a couple of these things. And again, I'm not going to take the time to edit their content or say, ooh, I don't like the way they said this, or gee, this isn't really compelling text for this audience, because the goal of today's lesson is responsive mobile design and not Deb poops on some websites text. So, perhaps we do something a little schmancy over here. And maybe this is, I'm going to manually adjust a lot of my fonts today. Nobody kill me. If you've taken a lesson from me, then you know I want you to do global widget styling. But today, not so much. All right, so what else can we say about this? So I find a lot of Italian websites want to tell you long stories about stuff, and they really don't get to the point very fast about what you need to know if you want to come to the darn place. So maybe after a little bit of the introduction that they have here, maybe we build a module where we now throw in the times they're open and what the tickets cost, just so that people don't have to scroll and scroll to find that. Maybe we surface that a little bit earlier. But again, you know, in a dreamy dream world, we would do some usability testing. Whoa, Akshay, what are you doing? I was trying to drag a box, not that whole thing. Reset view. All right, so let's see. I might have to change the size of this later, but let's go with this for now. And we'll call this background panel. And again, I'm just going to make a couple of different pieces, and then we'll start doing some mobile responsive design. 100% wide, fill, some sort of soft color. I'm going to go with soft peach. If you hung around me long enough, you know about me and the soft peach color. And now we can come in and copy and paste some of the information about the museum. Certainly we're going to want to know its address. Let's drop that in there. And again, I could spend a lot more time with the typography, you know, like a better visual hierarchy where, you know, the word address is bolder and larger, and, you know, go all out with it. I'm not going to do that because it's not the focus of today's lesson. I'm just getting some stuff on this page so that we can work on something more mobile friendly, because if you are visiting this page while I'm talking about it, you will see not mobile friendly. Let's try this here. Might have to move some things around. And let's see, open and all this other stuff, and what tickets cost. I'm just going to kind of jump ahead. So obviously, eventually I would include all of this information somewhere because there's good information here, but just to rush through this, I'm going to drag a couple of things here. And I'm trying to put different things in different places so that you can see later how we might adjust them for mobile responsive design. And again, this isn't the prettiest layout in the world. Don't worry about it. This is just a sample thing that I'm doing just so we can mess with some mobile responsive design. But we need something on which to do mobile responsive design. So let's grab this photo for a moment and we'll just drop it in. So we'll imagine that over here oh God, it's tiny. Over here, we'll imagine that we have a badly sized photo. Here we go. Sorry, I'm going to have to stretch this and it's probably going to look pretty crappy, but, you know, think of it as a placeholder. Okay, let's grab some more of the text and see if there's anything here that I always feel like it's all like wah 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 wah. Let's grab this text. And while I'm going, if you have any questions about mobile responsive design or things like that, please ask them so I can make sure to answer your questions while doing my little fake project here. Let's see if I can make these line up a little better. Let's try that. Okay, so, oops. So how is this looking? You might want to know. How is it going? Udipta says, a bit unrelated, when researching more about responsive sites, I came across the term adaptive design. I got confused because adaptive and responsive are similar. Great question, and I was going to address that because of Axure only does adaptive and not responsive, so we will definitely talk about that. So here's my extremely fake website, and I'm just trying to use a couple of traditional modules the way you might see in modern web design. Let's maybe copy a couple of more things things here, and then we can talk about how we would change these things for that. Maybe we do like they have here, these little blurbs. Avram says, why did you do soft peach where you did? So I did soft peach where I did because it created this effect. So my little soft peach rectangle, when I set it to, because it was a dynamic panel, when I set it to 100% wide, it gives me this background color, which is very common in modern web design, to have kind of a background color going full left to right, because otherwise this is a fixed width design for 1200, but then we can have this nice full kind of color going all the way. So let's grab these things at the bottom and turn them into something, and then we'll take a look at some mobile responsive stuff. So let's imagine this is going to be funky and ugly. It's going to be terrible. So just disregard its terribleness and just remember today is a lesson about mobile responsive design and not like amazing web design. I am not going to work hard to make an amazing website today. I'm going to work hard today to teach you mobile web design. Mobile responsive design, though, again, in Acture, it's going to be adaptive. And we'll talk about the difference in just a moment. Let me just finish making my ugly page. Now you're all thinking, gee, Deb, why are you even bothering? The original is better. And Jürgen says, this is 1200 pixels, so it's full-size desktop. Am I right? Yeah, and hypothetically, you could make a larger desktop version if you wanted to, but I'm just going to make these small, this just single one, and just assume that it scales in some way. And let's drop this over here. Yeah, I don't want to hear from anybody today. This is going to be bad. It's going to be uneven. It's going to be wacky, but you're just going to have to run with me on this, and we're going to do it anyway. Oop. Oh. Tiny font. Okay, this will go under here. There we go. Snappo. And this one will go under the other one. Ooh. Okay, so if I want this to be a background stripe, it's going to need to be bigger. Here we go. Let's make it a different color just for fun. We'll go with soft green. It's going to look terrible. I love that. Sylvia says, it might be uneven, but it's more readable than the original. Yeah, you know, I could do a little bit of a better job evening it up. But, you know, I'm not really thinking about it right now. Let's squish this picture, make everybody look too skinny. And we could bring this out to line up better with this other thing. But yeah, again, I would work harder on this if I had the time or felt more invested in it. I could maybe line this guy up with this thing. I don't even know anymore. So yeah, just remember, today is not how to make awesome web design. Today is let's talk about mobile responsive design. So let's see how this is looking. Yeah, that's pretty terrible. And I think we have a little layering problem. So let me take this and make sure it's sent to the back, which I think is this button. Send it back. Let's try it again. Okay, that's better. And I'll just put a placeholder at the bottom to pretend we have a website footer. And we will call it a thing. And we will get to making it mobile responsive, mobile adaptive in this sense. So, and then we'll talk about what is the difference between adaptive and responsive. Adaptive came first. Footer, placeholder. All right. All right, let's talk for a moment about the differences between adaptive and responsive. So once upon a time when we were first making websites for phones and mobile devices, you had what were called breakpoints, which meant, okay, this is what my website looks like if it's the screen has room for 1200 pixels. This is what it looks like if they're on a smaller laptop, the old MacBook Air or something, and they've got only room for 1024. This is what it looks like if it's a tablet and it's got 768. And you started having breakpoints, and the idea was that the breakpoint represented a possible width that the person's device had. And so we tended to design for breakpoints. And usually you would pick three. You would say, this is a laptop or computer screen. At the time, it was very often 1024 wide. This is an iPad. You had to decide if you thought people would use it like this or like this. So iPad like this was 768. And then you might say a phone, and an old style phone might have been 375 wide or even narrower. And so then you would have these breakpoints. You would create a design for each one, and then the people coding would have to figure that out. With mobile responsive, and again, I'm not a coder, so someone's going to describe this better than I am, maybe hopefully someone here. The idea is that we no longer have to have a design for all of these things. Instead, especially if we can use a grid system like this, there's ways in the code to be able to help the system understand that as the screen gets smaller, we no longer have this width, this is how things are going to stack and adjust. I personally don't know how that's coded, so I can't speak to it. I don't know if Avraham or Jürgen can speak to it, but the idea is that the difference between adaptive and responsive was that adaptive required you to design for pre-decided widths, and responsive was more like, hey, this could be anything you want, and it's going to keep adjusting for every single thing. If you open this up another centimeter, it's going to adjust again. Whereas the adaptive ones were more like blip, 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 based on the size of your screen. Now, Axure cannot do real responsive design because Axure doesn't know if you make it narrower 1 pixel or 100 pixels, how does your text wrap? Do your pictures change size? Do things start moving underneath each other? So Axure works based on adaptive design, which means we pre-decide widths. So that's what we're going to do here. And just to make this a little bit less annoying, I'm just going to turn off these guides just so that we don't need to look at them. And there we go. So we are going to be, so Axure is technically adaptive design, but it's still good enough because you can still show what would this look like on a super large screen, a regular screen. Not too many people use tablets that much anymore, but you could, tablet. And phone. So there you go. So yeah, this looks pretty bad, but I'm proud of it for no good reason. All right, let's also quickly make a fake header just so that we have something we can adjust later on. So let's take a couple of screenshots from the original. And so let's grab these people's logo. And we'll make a couple of fake navigation things so that as we adjust this, we can take a look at how the navigation would change. Okay, so we'll get their logo up in the top. And then let's just pretend, I'm just going to really quickly pretend we have a bunch of text links. Now they have like a bar with some different colors. I'm just going to make a quick thing. I'm going to call this nav1. It's a little bit on the small side. Let's make it a little bigger. So just for pretending, everybody pretend with me. Okay, so nav1, and we'll pretend there's a couple of different things here. Nav2. So again, also not pretty, but you get the idea. Nav3, and we could even just drag that out over here. So whatever. Okay, fake nav. Alrighty. Udipta says, okay, so in a design tool, we can technically only design adaptive, but in code, it becomes fluid or responsive. Yeah, I can't speak for Figma or some of the other tools. I don't know if they have some way of designing more responsive, but certainly in Axure, you are dealing with adaptive. And in fact, if you take a look over here, this will say add adaptive views. And this is where we can teach Axure what is going on here. Now, some people say mobile first. I kind of don't believe in mobile first unless it's an app, because very often we're starting with a desktop design. And then once we realize that's going pretty well and it's testing well and it's got all the right stuff, then I like to make the mobile version, because sometimes the mobile version is a subset. Sometimes there are things I remove from the page because I say, you know what, someone who's scrolling on this phone thing and maybe has a shorter attention span or just needs to hit the high notes, they don't want as much stuff. Let's put less stuff on the mobile page. So I tend to think of the desktop version as the full set, and sometimes a mobile is a subset. So, but that's up to you. Could have the same stuff in both places. Avram says, how much does a UX designer focus on pretty? Isn't that the role of UI? So yeah, so in this sense, I would normally rely on a visual or UI or brand designer to tell me the font sizes, the font coloring, any brand or mood elements that we're using. They might come up with some stock photos or real photos. So yeah, I'm usually designing in what we call medium fidelity, and someone else who has way more artistic talent than I am is making this look better. If you happen to also be artistically talented, then maybe you're working on that attractiveness element as well. But typically I'm making something that's a little bit plainer, and then I'm having somebody with art talent make it more relevant to the brand and the mood. So I'm going to teach Axure. Let's pretend that we have a tablet version, and it's going to be iPad size, even though I'm not too sure how much people still use the old iPad. And then let's say we've got a phone version, and I'm going to use old school bacon strip. You know, what's that, iPhone 5? That's a really narrow phone, but just for practice, let's play with it, because, you know, it's a bad case scenario, and some people still have old phones. Okay, so now we've taught Axure. And again, you can use any tool you want for this. Axure is not required. You can make separate wireframes. You can use Figma. This is not tool specific. I'm just using Axure because I dig it. So what Axure does now is I've got a base, I've got a tablet, and I've got a phone. So when I go to tablet, you can see Axure says, hey, this is only 768 wide. You're coloring out of the lines. And then when I go to phone, it says, hey, you are really coloring out of the lines. This is all of the space that you have. So now what I can do is I can go into the tablet version, and I can start deciding how things change. So first of all, let's bring these in, because they are off the screen. And now let's bring this in, and this one's going to have to be smaller. And our headline is probably going to have to be a different font size. Now, again, if you've taken my Axure courses and you know about global widget styles, and if you've taken my courses, then you know that you can make a different global widget style for base, tablet, and phone. But again, I'm not using my global styles here. I'm working super fast today, so I'm just going to do this manually. Maybe for a tablet, we're going with a large font, but not that large a font. And of course, we want to bring back our CTA. And again, I would normally work a lot harder to line some of these things up and make it look more like the desktop version, but here I'm just kind of going fast. And so here, let's say this is going to run from here to here. Jürgen says, I still have the iPhone SE. That's right. Some people do. So, and we want to show them the love. Okay, so let's give this a little bit of breathing room. Let's put this here. Now we've got to pull these other things up, and we have to decide, you know, as the screen gets narrower, does the font get smaller? Do these stack in some way? You know, what happens here? So we might have to play with a couple of different ideas based on what seems to look good or work good. Sylvia says, as far as I know, no tool is capable of simulating responsive design. That's why changing something in the design 3 times can become cumbersome. Yeah, that's why I like Axure, because then we don't have to do it. You're kind of doing it 3 times, but then they're all connected, and so it still ends up a little bit better. Let's imagine maybe we stack these two and we put this one next to it. I'm not saying that's a great design. I'm just saying it's an idea I have, and I'm going to play with it. And maybe we make these a little bit narrower. And again, I don't have my guides open right now. Hypothetically, you would have your guides. I don't know if Axure does the responsive guides. Yeah, I've just told it show global guides, and it didn't know what to do. So I would have to rebuild those. All right, so let's imagine we've got this peach background. And let's move these down. And again, I'm not saying this is great design. I'm just saying these are some of the things I take into consideration when I'm doing this. How do things stack? Is there a way these can lay out that would make sense? Is there anything I don't want on this screen? Maybe for this one, I've decided that I kind of like this picture centered, and I want the blurb to come in under it. So you can certainly do that. Sylvia says, I like Axure more and more. We'll wait till you see what we do. So maybe I do this with it. Yeah, I would work harder to make sure. These are not even on left and right, but I would work harder to make sure they were. Let's see. This one's going to have to move down because our page is getting longer because it got narrower. And so let's say we bring this down, and perhaps we stack these. So perhaps we end up with this being a little bit more centered, like this. And maybe we bring in the other one under it, and we'll have to move the placeholder down. And put this over here. And again, I would work much harder to make sure that the distance between the picture and the text is the same. Over here is the distance between the picture and the text, but right now I'm going fast motion so that I can show you some of the way that I approach this. Obviously, the footer would get narrower. You know, would it get longer? Depends what's in there. So let's check this. Let's see how we're doing. So this is our desktop version. And now I can tell Axure to show me the tablet version. Here we go. So this is our tablet version. It's a little sloppy, but you get the idea. Yeah, maybe these should really go side to side. They're a little bit wide. But anyway, you see the point there. So now I'm thinking like, not the best use of space. These two should probably be next to each other and maybe just brought down a little bit in size. I also didn't change the size of the fonts. I think most people on a tablet would want to read a good size font. Udipta says, another question, is it good or bad practice or a case of it depends to scale the typography when making something responsive? Yeah, I like to make sure that the font is going to be readable for whatever device you're on. In some cases, that means making the font bigger, and in some cases, that means making the font smaller. But ultimately, I defer to the visual designers and the UI designers who are much better at typography than I am. My main thing is going to be to make sure that this is accessible and that we're not getting into font that's too small. A common mistake I see in UX portfolios from people who haven't studied design that much is they will just take something that they've built in an app or mobile web, and they will just keep making it smaller and smaller and smaller until it's a ridiculous font size, and that doesn't work. Okay, so we've got our tablet, though again, it needs a little bit of help, but you get the idea. Now we would have to do the phone version, and I'm going to kill the navigation because the phone would probably end up with a hamburger menu. So what about our hero here? So we might still have a hero, and move it up a little bit. And chances are our headline could go under the hero so that we're not covering the photo. So maybe it goes here, and maybe the text becomes centered and maybe even a little bit smaller than this for a phone. Seems a bit big, but again, you might say, nope, nope, on our phone stuff, we love big fonts. We love them. So, okay, so now, and I've got my call to action, which I might put nicely under here. Okay, there we go. Now we have our first block of text, and I will drop it at 10 and then make it 355 wide, and of course it's way too big. So now we start needing maybe some more normal size text, and we need to again have that visual hierarchy. This was originally much larger than other text. Maybe this one comes in at 20, and maybe some of the other ones come in even smaller. Maybe this needs to be bigger, you know. So again, I leave it to the people who are better at this stuff than I am. I'm also going to move everything down. Give me a second. We're going to need to buy some space because we're going to have a lot more stuff being vertical than horizontal. So buy myself some space. Okay. Okay, so what about these two? These two probably need to move over a little bit, and let's put them here. Again, you might lay them out differently. You might say, oh, I want a dress to be centered, and then everything else is under it is going to be, left justified. So again, you might make some text changes here. We might bring this one in underneath. Let's try that. We're going to need to expand our soft peachy world. Let's try that. And now let's move this image up, and we'll scale it so that it's full left to right. And now we've got to bring in our text. This text feels small. Oh, I've zoomed out. That's what happened. I'm at 55%. Let's zoom back in. There we go. Okay, so this text could be okay. It could be big. It could be small. Again, up to everybody there. Oop. Let's bring it, I'm using some small margins, 10 and 355 wide. Again, someone might tell me I like more margins than that. It's, it's up to, I'm going to say it's up to somebody else. How about maybe 14? And what's coming in next? Our little green world here. So we'll drop this here. And again, if I were doing a real design, I would be much more careful about matching up sizing and margins, and I'm not being careful at all. So just remember that's part of this is really to focus on that precision, in my opinion. You want to get your spacing right and things like that. So we've got this here. This could go here. And again, you might say, oh, for phone, we want these headlines to be centered. And then we're going to bring in this picture. And we have to fix that size. Ratio 355. Bring in this one. And center it. Okay. And say that's it for green, and pull up our placeholder for the footer. Phone websites usually have footers, but they're not going to be this tall. That would be a bit much. Let's say they look like that. All right, let's refresh it, see how it's looking. So here's our tablet version, and now here's our phone version. So again, pretend that this little bacon strip is all the room we've got on our phone. And we can take a look at how that is appearing. And again, we can even pull this out and we can adjust the browser width if we want to try to replicate that. You could open this up on your phone. If you've loaded it up to the Axure cloud, you could open this up on your phone. Marisol says, is Axure free for viewers? Yes. Yes, it costs nothing to view an Axure prototype because an Axure prototype is ultimately a bunch of HTML. So it's either going to be on your intranet or your hard drive or the Axure cloud, which is an external website. I've been loading this up to the Axure cloud. So let me reload it now that we've made some changes. And if you'd like to open this prototype up on your computer, you absolutely can. You would go to this link down here. So this says number 2, and then all lowercase, letter H, letter J, letter H, letter N, letter B, .axshare.com. Marisol says, can viewers leave comments for designers wondering for future use? Axure does have a commenting feature. I don't know if I have it turned on. Give me a moment. Let me see. Publish. Publish. Not my notes. Interactions, fonts. I think for that you have to invite people to your workspace. I don't think they need a copy of Axure, but I think they have to have access to your workspace, because it would look like this, axure.cloud. And let's say I log in. And this is Think Out Loud Streams. And this is not here. I just uploaded it today. I must have put it into the wrong folder. Let's try again. Oh, private workspace museum site. Yeah, I messed that up. All right, so let's just jump into it on the Axure Cloud. So the idea is that here are some of these pages, and I can go into them, and then I think somewhere in here is where I can leave the comments, but here, add comment, here it is. It must be the same. Yeah, so I think you have to have Axure, the Axure Cloud access, but you don't have to have an Axure license. Then people can leave comments. And you can pick where you want it, and you can leave you know, a comment, as people do. So there you go. Boom. All right, let's go back to our phone version. Again, this is extremely mediocre, but we're getting closer to something that could be some sort of phone version. And again, to me, a lot of this is going to depend on how you've decided your phone version goes from the perspective of the visual design and the typography and the branding, because I'm just kind of throwing things around, but we would hypothetically have a component library, a UI kit, a design system, something that tells me how are these things spaced and what's our margins and what font size do we use for the different you know, maybe not breakpoints, since breakpoints aren't responsive, but hypothetically in a phone version, what is header 1? On a tablet version, what is header 1? Things like that. So someone would have dictated that. I am just going wacky with this one. So, oh, it's me again. Hi. So let's quickly build a phone menu. And and quickly, for people who are actually curious, if you change any of the words, they will change across all the views, on the assumption that if you change a word, you probably wanted it changed in all places. So if we say lorem ipsum catchy slogan or headline, yes. And that means if I come to the tablet, it says yes, and if I come to the phone, it says yes. So one nice thing about Axure is that even though in some ways you are making these different versions for the different adaptive views, that they have a sense of inheriting. And so if you're doing things in one place, they'll do it in another. You know, I have a whole lesson on this. If you really get bored and you'd like to learn more, you can certainly go to YouTube. And I don't know if I'm probably logged in as the wrong account, so it's going to show me weird things, but you can put in Delta CX Axure adaptive views, and here it is. You can watch my lesson 1701, which is an entire video about adaptive views, and I have a little fake web page where I really go more deeply into it. But for the purposes of this lesson, we can talk more about this type of responsive design in general. And also just a reminder to everybody, please subscribe. And don't forget that we need a Think Out Loud for next week, because this might be all I say about this week. So yeah, normally I'm trying to make sure that everything works and looks good and makes sense. But typically, again, I am following somebody else's UI style kit. So for example, we know that stuff has to be X pixels away from a button, and that if it's a phone version, the button is always centered, or the button is right justified but in 20 pixels, or whatever it is. And then normally, if this is Acture, and especially if I'm going to bring this to usability testing, then I need to create a hamburger menu. Why hamburger menus are still at the top of the page, I do not know. I would think by now that these should be at the bottom of the page. I'm seeing more and more apps and stuff putting their hamburger menus and navigation on the bottoms of pages. Are people seeing that too, or on the bottoms of screens? Because let's face it, that's where our fingers and thumbs are. I don't understand why we still put these up here. To me, this should be like a floating bottom thing, but you know, I'm not going to go against the entire world just right now. This is a little bit on the big side. We can bring this down. So maybe we bring this down to a height of 25. But those of you who know my design style, you know that I still want to be kind to people and give them large tappable areas. So even though that is 25, I can still use the Acture hotspot to make a larger tappable area on it, so we are more forgiving for, as we say, fat fingers. You know, that's not an insult to anybody. We all have messy fingers. Then I need to build some sort of slidey out menu. And again, I'm going to go super lazy on this, and I'm just going to drag this box out. Actually, let's drag it over here for a moment. I'm going to design this off to the side, and then I'll move it where I want it. So let's imagine that we have this slidey out menu, and we're going to write some stuff on it. That's too big. That is way too big. We're going to have to fix that for our phone version. Jeepers, that's way too big. Let's also bring, sometimes these have an X where you can close them, or you might still see the hamburger menu to press it and close it again. So I'm just going to quickly grab an X and use that. Though again, hypothetically, our visual designer would have given me some sort of asset so that I'm not guessing at these icons. We would know what we use, and I would have the right size and the right color and all of that, because this might look kind of crappy, but I'm going to go with it anyway. All right. Because again, today is more about the theory and the learning than the exact design that I've done. So we might imagine that over here we have those nav1s and nav2s and nav3s. Now, I deleted them before, but what if I wanted to bring them back in Acture? I can say, here they are, nav1, nav2, nav3, place in view. Thank you. And let's drag them over here. We're going to need a little help with bring to front. And here's our nav. And again, the neat thing about using them from the other spot is that if we change the words, these will all change, and that will be a nice consistent thing. And oops, we can do quick lining up. Close enough. So we'll make this a dynamic panel, which again, if you're not that familiar with Acture, doesn't mean much, but I will call it menu panel. I will say it is hidden by default. And I will also build it so that if people click on the X, though I want them to click on a large tappable area because I'm very generous. Ray says, I just joined. Hi, Ray. But calling typography, scaling, I don't want to block anybody. Scaling typography is a must between screen sizes. Yes. And I'm not responsible for it. So I am totally guessing right now. But again, normally I am either working with an artist or visual designer or UI designer or brand designer. And those people are telling me, hey, here's the style guide. do the thing. So I totally agree with Ray. We've got to make sure this is being done correctly. I know I'm the wrong person to do it. Okay. Let's move this over here. And let's grab this and build a thing. We only have a few more minutes for today, so if anybody has any thoughts or questions, and remember, if you'd like to send in something for next week, use deltacx.com/links to find the area where you can say, hey, I want to submit something for Think Out Loud. So you can send something real or realistic or totally fake, you know, whatever makes sense for you. So let's see how this is looking. Refresh. Hamburger menu, interact with it, or close it. So again, chances are, given the size of the phone, I would probably have to make that taller if I wanted it to run the full way. If I wanted it to screen out the rest of the screen when it slides open, we could do that too. So that would be treat as lightbox. Treat as lightbox. That's too dark. Let's give it a 90. Close enough. Refresh. So again, that would hypothetically screen out the rest of the stuff, which sometimes people do. Axure doesn't have like a blurring, so we could just kind of screen out the rest of the stuff, or we could leave it where it was. I didn't put any cheesy shadows on here, and of course we can close that up. So I would say that's probably a pretty good mini lesson on doing some fake mobile responsive design. In this case, this was adaptive because we came up with some breakpoints. Here's what it looks like on an iPad. Here's what it looks like on the desktop, and then we have our phone version. So these are some of the things that I consider when I am doing this type of design. But typically when I'm designing the page, I'm trying to make sure that we've learned from our research what information is most useful to people, what information is most compelling, or what's the most likely reason these people have hit this website. Think about our task analysis. What are people here to do? The more likely it is that it's something they're here to do, or it's compelling or important, the higher on the page it's going to go. And of course, I do not want a pop-up asking you to join the mailing list. Marisol says Figma does breakpoints too. Excellent. Yeah, as I said, you absolutely don't have to use Axure. I love Axure, and this is not sponsored, but if you have another tool that you prefer, the point is to do great design in whatever tool is most comfortable for you. And especially if Figma addresses it kind of the way Axure does, where we have these one design that just has these 3 different views. And by the way, those of you who know Axure know that it's more of a prototyping tool. And of course, you can build different interactions for the different views, which is also neat. If the button does something different on the phone than it does on the tablet, you don't have to make a separate button. That Axure can handle that. So from a prototyping perspective, this is super. So let's see if I can go back to a giant picture of me and take some of your last questions. Here we go. It does if you want. Cool. Cool. Then Figma could be a good choice too if people are not looking to do the realistic prototyping that Axure does, but that Figma is what you like or what you use or good enough or whatever the case may be. Any other thoughts or questions about responsive mobile design? I know that was a short lesson, but I figured good to kind of play with a little bit of a sample page and and see what questions people had. But again, ultimately, a lot of the questions that you all had were great questions, but they were mostly about things that I'm normally not responsible for, like the typography and how things would visually change or space based on those different things. I'm used to getting style guides or design systems from my visual counterparts. So that is why I'm sometimes do these things a little bit sloppy, and then I get the official guide on how this should have been done, and I go back and clean it up and make it a little bit more pixel accurate. All right, and again, please remember that I have nothing to do on next Monday's Think Out Loud show, so please do send something in. You can send in something you want to see me design at deltacx.com/links. You can also find more information about the show there, and of course, please do subscribe. If you enjoy the shows, please find 3 people you think would enjoy our channel and send them over. Tomorrow will be Office Hours Ask Me Anything, both the 10 a.m. version and the 6:30 p.m. version Italy time, so adjust for where you are. Ray says, I've been starting in Figma, but found it doesn't do as much as you may need. Yeah, again, everybody's got favorite tools for different reasons. I don't want to poop too much on anybody's particular tool. Again, I use only Axure, so I'm just biased because Axure is my only tool. I don't use Figma or Sketch. I don't sketch on paper. I'm just 100% Axure, so I just tend to be very biased towards it, but I think everybody should try the tools that are out there and see which one works best for you and your style and what you need to usability test. Ray says, tools, all depends on what you need. Use MS Paint if you need. Yeah, I once saw a prototype someone did in Microsoft Excel. It was amazing and it worked, but man, that was weird. I don't recommend it, but you could do it. That's it. You could do it, but I don't recommend it. Toonsys can drive, but not very well. And let's see, Wednesday, we do have a show. Wednesday, I'll be reading my new article on real lean versus fake lean. Let's see, I know we've got another thing coming up. Is it next week? No. Is it the week after? I know that we're putting Larry in on March 2nd as a micro lesson. So mark your calendar. It's not in the calendar yet. You are the first to know. We're going to be adding a micro lesson from Larry on March 2nd. And on March 9, we've got Darren Hood as an individual guest. And I think his topic is how to tell good and bad UX education. So let's see, March 9. Yeah, how to evaluate UX education the Darren Hood way. So that's going to be March 9. John says they've got a lot of overlap and they all got their own shortcomings. That's true. You know, tools are great and tools are also kind of annoying. And Ray says, I'm going to do my next prototype in KidPix. I don't know what that is. I assume I'm too old to know what that is. For me, it would be Print Shop Pro. Anybody want to Google that one from my Apple II days in 1985 or 87, whenever that was? Who remembers Print Shop Pro? Is anybody as old as I am? No, surely not. No one can be. It's me and the sarcophagus. So just know that I am starting to book some more shows, but they're mostly coming in March. I have so many wild deadlines in February that I have not been booking as many interviews and podcasts, and I apologize. Some of you miss them and some of you don't, but hopefully we'll have a fuller schedule in March. Sylvia says, gotta go. Thanks for this. Good evening. Yep, I'm going too. So the show is over. Thanks to everybody for joining. And again, please do send in your ideas for what I can design next week. I'm open to any reasonable idea that is more on the design side than on the research side so that we can come up with some random ideas, pretend users wanted them, pretend we did research and design something and bring it to life. John says, no, I age myself when I talk about Macromedia Freehand. I also remember Macromedia Freehand. All right, everybody, I'm going to play us out of here. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks to Udipta for a cool idea for a show. And I'll see everybody tomorrow for Office Hours. Thanks. Bye. Customer centricity as business intelligence. Visit deltacx.com to learn why we are